Whilomville Stories Part 11, The Fight, Stephen Crane, Short Stories. The child life of the neighbourhood was sometimes moved in its depths at the sight of wagon loads of furniture arriving in front of some house which, with closed blinds and barred doors, had been for a time a mystery or even a fear. The boys often expressed this fear by stamping bravely and noisily on the porch of the house, and then suddenly darting away with screams of nervous laughter, as if they expected to be pursued by something uncanny. There was a group who held that the cellar of a vacant house was certainly the abode of robbers, smugglers, assassins, mysterious masked men in council about the dim rays of a candle, and possessing skulls, emblematic bloody daggers, and owls. Then, near the 1st of April, would come along a wagon load of furniture, and children would assemble on the walk by the gate and make serious examination of everything that passed into the house, and taking no thought whatever of masked men. One day it was announced in the neighbourhood that a family was actually moving into the Hannigan house. Next door to Dr. Trescott's Jimmy was one of the first to be informed, and by the time some of his friends came dashing up, he was versed in much. "Any boys?" they demanded eagerly. "Yes," answered Jimmy proudly. "One's a little fella, and yet one's most big as me. I saw 'em, I did." "Where are they?" asked Willie Dalzell, as if under the circumstances he could not take Jimmy's word, but must have the evidence of his senses. "Oh, they're in there," said Jimmy, carelessly. It was evident he owned these new boys. Willie Dalzell resented Jimmy's proprietary way. "Ho!" he cried scornfully. "Why don't they come out, then? Why don't they come out?" "How'd I know?" said Jimmy. "Well," retorted Willie Dalzell, "you seemed to know so thundering much about 'em." At the moment a boy came strolling down the gravel walk which led from the front door to the gate. He was about the height and age of Jimmy Trescott, but he was as thick through the chest and had fat legs. His face was round and rosy and plump, but his hair was curly black, and his brows were naturally darkling, so that he resembled both a pudding and a young bull. He approached slowly the group of older inhabitants, and they had grown profoundly silent. They looked he looked over them over. They might have been savages observing the first white man, or white men observing the first savage. The silence held steady. As he neared the gate, the strange boy wandered off to the left in a definite way, which proved his instinct to make a circular voyage when in doubt. The motionless group stared at him. In time this unsmiling scrutiny worked upon him somewhat, and he leaned against the fence and fastidiously examined one shoe. In the end, Willie Dalzell authoritatively broke the stillness. "What's your name?" said he gruffly. "Johnny Hedge, 'tis," answered the new boy. Then came another great silence while Whilomville pondered this intelligence. Again came the voice of authority. "Where'd you live before?" "Jersey City." These two sentences completed the first section of the formal code. The second section concerned itself with the establishment of the newcomer's exact position in the neighbourhood. "I kin lick you," announced Willie Dalzell, and awaited the answer. The hedge boy had stared at Willie Dalzell, but he stared at him again. After a pause, he said, "I know you kin." "Well," demanded Willie, "kin he lick you?" And he indicated Jimmy Trescott with a sweep, which announced plainly that Jimmy was the next in prowess. Whereupon the new boy looked at Jimmy respectfully but carefully, and at length said, "I dunno." This was the signal for an outburst of shrill screaming, and everybody pushed Jimmy forward. He knew what he had to say, and as befitted the occasion, he said it fiercely. "Kin you lick me?" The new boy also understood what he had to say, and despite his unhappy and lonely state, he said it bravely. "Yes." "Well," retorted Jimmy bluntly, "come out and do it then." Just come out and do it." And these words were greeted with cheers. These little rascals yelled that there should be a fight at once. They were in bliss over the prospect. "Go on, Jim, make him come out. He said he'd lick you. He could lick you." There probably never was a fight among this class in Whilomville which was not the result of the goading and guying of two proud lads by a populace of urchins who simply wished to see a show. Willie Dowsel was very busy. He turned first to the one and then said to the other, "You said you could lick him. Well, why don't you come out and do it then? You said you could lick him, didn't you?" "Yes," answered the new boy, dogged and dubious. Willie tried to drag Jimmy by the arm. "Oh, go on, Jimmy, you ain't afraid, are you?" "No," said Jimmy. The two victims opened wide eyes at each other. The fence separated them, and so it was impossible for them to immediately engage, but they seemed to understand that they were ultimately to be sacrificed to the ferocious aspirations of the other boys, and each scanned the other to learn something of his spirit. They were not angry at all. They were merely two little gladiators who were being clamorously told to hurt each other. Each displayed hesitation and doubt without displaying fear. They did not exactly understand what were their feelings, and they moodily kicked the ground and made low and sullen answers to Willie Dowsel, who worked like a circus manager. "Oh, go on, Jim, what's the matter with you? You ain't afraid, are ya? Well then, say something." This sentiment received more cheering from the abandoned little wretches who wished to be entertained, and in this cheering there could be heard notes of derision of Jimmy Trescott. The latter had a position to sustain. He was well known. He often bragged of his willingness and ability to thrash other boys. Well then, here was a boy of his size who said he could not thrash him. What was he going to do about it? The crowd made these arguments very clear and repeated them again and again. Finally, Jimmy, driven to aggression, walked close to the fence and said to the new boy, "The first time I catch you out of your own yard, I'll lam the head off on you." This was received with wild plaudits by the Whilomville urchins. But the new boy stepped back from the fence. He was awed by Jimmy's formidable mien, but he managed to get out a semi-defiant sentence. "Maybe you will and maybe you won't," said he. However, his short retreat was taken as a practical victory for Jimmy, and the boys hooted him bitterly. He remained inside the fence, swinging one foot and scowling, while Jimmy was escorted off down the street amid acclamations. The new boy turned and walked back toward the house, his face gloomy, lined deep with discouragement, as if he felt that the new environment's antagonism and palpable cruelty was sure to prove too much for him. The mother of Johnny Hedge was a widow, and the chief theory of her life was that her boy should be in school on the greatest possible number of days. He himself had no sympathy with this ambition, but she detected the truth of his diseases with an unerring eye, and he was required to be really ill before he could win the right to disregard the first spell. Morning and noon, the chicken pox and the mumps had given him vacations of misery, wherein he nearly died between pain and nursing, but bad colds in the head did nothing for him, and he was not able to invent a satisfactory hacking cough. His mother was not consistently a Tartar. In most things he stayed her to his will. He was allowed to have more jam, pickles, and pie than most boys. She respected his profound loathing of Sunday school. On summer evenings he could remain out of doors until 8:30, but in this matter of the school she was inexorable. This single point in her character was of steel.